Aging Well webinar. Sorry for the short delay, we were just getting set up in the background there. So I'm very pleased to be able to introduce Dr. Jitka, the Senior Lecturer of the Health and Social Care Department at the Open University, who's going to present to us today as part of the East Northants Area Health and Wellbeing Festival programme that I've organised. So very excited to learn a bit more about the work Dr. Jitka is involved in. And also just a quick thank you to Northamptonshire Sport for facilitating the webinar today. So before I hand over, we would very much welcome questions from you during the course of the presentation. If you could type those in the chat for us, then myself and Jackie from Northamptonshire Sport will pick those up, and then we'll have the conversation with Jitka towards the end. So thanks again for joining us, and over to you, Jitka.
Thank you so much, Joe, and everyone. Thank you for organizing this, and thank you for inviting me. So today I'm going to be talking about a resource I have co-created with other colleagues, and I'm leading at the Open University, which is titled Aging Well Public Talk Series, and the talk today, as usually our first talks are titled, is Are We Ready to Live Longer? Because throughout this series, we all know that we are rapidly aging, that the aging starts since the day we're born, and that there are physical, psychological, and cognitive decline that happens at different speeds for different individuals. We also know that aging processes are in general very difficult to predict, and that some genetic predispositions may need to be taken into account regarding the overall aging as a process. But this process is very much codified by what we actually do about it. You have certainly heard the motto that goes around aging, which is use it or lose it. In other words, both cognitive and physical functions while aging are declining. And through being active, linking to 5 pillars of aging well that I'm going to talk about today a lot, we are able to preserve cognitive and physical functions we don't want to lose. And this is very much important as well during the COVID-19 times and in terms of post-pandemic. These talks have started as talks in order to build bridges. I have started these about 18 years ago as a PhD student at Charles University, together with Third Age University in Czech Republic, in Prague. And I have ever since been involved in public talks and participatory public talks for populations in order to support wide populations with aging and or supporting the professionals who work in their professional roles with aging populations and want to support them better. These talks are also a component of an international online education platform for clinicians and allied health professionals in China, which are streamed via the UK EMED and Cambridge Medical Academy. During these talks, we usually explore approaches which may enable us to live longer and healthier lives. We talk around theories of aging, although not exhaustively. We talk about biomedical and psychosocial aspects of aging and the most common comorbidities. And for example, aging brain are some of the concepts that are more in depth explored in the series. We link it all to 5 pillars aging well, which are nutrition, hydration, physical stimulation, social stimulation, and cognitive stimulation. So today I would like to introduce these pillars. I would like to introduce these Aging Well public talks as a resource that is also aligned with several open learn short and public facing articles around specific aspects of the talks. So I'll talk a little bit more about this at the end, because all the resources are listed at the end of this presentation. And I'm very happy for Jackie and Joe to share the presentation with you if you would like to have a copy, to have access to the links and everything you need. Also, these talks have come about as building bridges. So, as I said, building bridges between sometimes us academics who are tempted to work in an isolated way in our ivory towers, and the public that actually really can make most of any findings that are being made in the research fields that is progressing quite quickly. But as we all know, the research findings are not easily shared with the public. The language that we as researchers often use is not very encouraging or clear, doesn't add clarity, and doesn't really leave people out with understanding, okay, this is what we all have coming, what can I do better today to facilitate my aging well for the rest of my life, for the rest of my long lifespan. So this is what these talks are initially trying to do, with also inviting people from the public, members of public, to come and talk about things, to share their stories, to share how they feel about some of the aspects of aging, what has been their experience and what has been helpful to them to know and to understand. So these talks are not only streamed towards people in a public-facing language, but they also facilitate and invite participation from public to further engage communities in discussing our aging well. So the series plan for this year that we are organizing at the Open University. So the Open University is hosting these talks for the third year. So this year we have a third year 3 of the Aging Well Public Talks. These talks are free to attend. There are associated resources that are free to download. There are presentations, and talks are usually happening once a month. So the first talk that has happened in September was around whether we're prepared to live longer, and we're going to see some of it. Of course, we don't have all the time to actually go through the whole talk because they are slightly longer, but I hope it's going to be enough to kind of give a taster or a feel about how these talks are organized, how the information is being shared, how very much we invite participation from the public and professionals supporting public with aging well. And if you would be more interested in some of these talks for specific audiences, of course, please do let me know. I'm very happy to discuss that further. So we had also a talk on advanced care planning where Barbara Gale, who is a CEO in St. Nicholas Hospice, gave an overview of her expertise and life experience of actually working in a hospice, helping people not only to age well, but also helping people to die well. So this talk is very much about what do we need to know and do before we die. It is very much focused around advanced care planning, but not only. It is also linking to death and dying and how to support people with death and dying. The talk that we're getting ready for November is titled Aging Brain, and I will be partnered by Professor Marco Calabria, who is professor in neuropsychology in university in Catalonia in Spain, and we will be exploring how it happens that our brain is aging, how does our brain age, and what is it we can do to boost our cognitive and psychological functions, how to protect our mental health, and how to stay well and keep our brain functioning optimally for as long as possible. So this talk is going to happen in November. You are of course very welcome, and I'm happy to share the links to all the talks. They are happening via Microsoft Teams meetings this year. Next year we hope that we'll be able to use Zoom. The Open University does not allow us easily to use Zoom, so there are a few battles to be had on that field. The talk after the aging brain, that will be in December, is about learning languages and digital technologies in older age, where my colleague Ursula Stickler, who is a senior lecturer at the Open University, will explore and talk about what has she learned through her research that is linking to learning languages and digital technologies as we age. How does aging change the way we may or may not be looking at digital technologies, and how learning languages is extremely brain boosting exercise, and it can be also fun. Ursula will also have some nice break games, so it is definitely one worth attending as well. Then we will break for Christmas, and the first talk in the new year will be around disenfranchising grief and caring in older age, where Dr. Kerry Jones, who is lecturer in end-of-life care at the Open University, will be talking about how do we tend to work with grief, and what is anticipatory grief, and how is it costing us, and how does it link to frailty, and how does it link to our overall well-being. So this is something that's a very interesting and important subject. We have done some research with Kerry Jones around frailty and grief and anticipatory grief. So this is going to be a very interesting talk, and Kerry is a brilliant speaker as well. Then the talk after that will be looking at nutritional needs while aging. Well, I will be co-presenting with Alan Hastings, who is member of public. We will be talking about why nutrition matters. What do we need to know about eating well, eating regularly, and have a varied diet. Also, as it supports our overall well-being, not just physical well-being, but also psychological and mental health and well-being. And Alan, in addition to that, will be sharing his lived experience with being diagnosed with diabetes in his late 50s. And actually, he will give a nice account of how much it costed him not being aware of nutritional needs earlier, and how much he has learned, and how he needed to overhaul his life because he decided that taking medication will not be his way. So he had to really overhaul his life and habits to manage with nutrition and exercise, which, as we know, is the best way to tackle diabetes type 2. Nevertheless, even though we know it's the best way, it's not the easiest way. So Alan will talk more about that. Then talk after that we do with Sonal Mehta, who is a senior pharmacist in Milton Keynes, and we have worked together for several years, and this talk will be looking at pharmacotherapy while aging, and why, as we go into our 40s, 50s, and even 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s, why the medication might be behaving differently as we age. What do we need to do to make sure that the medication we may need to be taking at regular intervals in the day or every day doesn't stay in our bodies for longer than strictly necessary, and what happens if the medication does stay longer, and how it affects our overall physical as well as cognitive and mental health and well-being. A talk after that will be looking at mindfulness and aging, which will be presented by a colleague of mine, Abigail Metley. Abby is a senior psychologist, and she specializes in neuropsychology, and she works in the NHS, and we have been again working together for a few years. We have also co-created quite a few interesting resources that I will point out at the end of the talk. Some of those, or most of those, are relating to our brain functions as we age, how to stay well, how to keep our brain functioning optimally. Why is it important to be mindful as we age? Why is it important to stay outdoors? So these are all resources that you might find interesting. The talk after this will be looking at Move It and Breathe, so it will be more detailed journey into our muscle aging, what happens with our bones, with our joints, with our tendons. And I'm partnered for that by Dr. Declan Ryan from University of Northampton, who is exercise physiologist, an excellent colleague of mine. And again, we've been working together for a few years now. So this will be quite another nice and exciting talk to attend to. The talk after that will be about standing tall. So we will be basing this a lot on the Move It and Breathe talk, where we talk about muscles, bones, and we also talk about our posture. Why is posture important? How we can prevent falls if we look after our posture, if we look after our bones and muscles and joints and tendons. And this talk will kind of build up on that in terms of standing tall and giving a few tips against the gravity of aging that is kind of affecting us all, on some days more, on some days less, and definitely as we grow older, the gravity of aging is a little bit there. So what do we need to do to brace ourselves against it? And the last talk in the series in July will be by my colleague Dr. Andreas Vossler, who is senior psychologist, senior lecturer in psychology, and is focusing on things we don't talk about, such as intimacy and aging. You can see for more information and live streaming links to follow this link at the Open University. And if you would be interested in having any of these talks done separately, I'm very happy to talk that through with you and discuss what talks and how we could do that. So all the way through the Aging Well talks, we explore how using this knowledge might facilitate self-management, and why is it so important for us to become partners in our care and delay the aging processes for as much as we can. Also, the emphasis is on optimizing our cognitive and physical well-being, psychological aging and self-management. To a lesser extent, we focus on pathological processes while aging. So, as we probably know, we talk about aging. Aging is a natural process. So, when aging progresses as more or less expected, we talk about natural or physiological aging. When we are hit by, for example, neurodegenerative illnesses, this is where we start talking about pathological processes while aging, or pathological aging. This often, for example, relates to neurodegenerative conditions we might be fearing in our older age, as for example one of the types of dementia, or Alzheimer's disease, for example, or another type of neurodegenerative impairment. Of course, we do talk about why do this happen, and how do the neurodegenerative conditions or diseases happen, what happens, but we do not focus the whole talk around it. It is just a part of the talk, and we much more focus on kind of the positive message around how we can optimize and boost whatever functions we have and we do not want to lose. So this is how these talks are kind of shaped and presented. All the way through the talks, we promote physical activity, social activity, networking, learning, healthy lifestyle, and we do also easy stretching during each talk. And for some talks, the talks I do an easy gentle stretching, just for us to become posture aware, to understand what is our posture in space, how do we keep our posture, and to kind of help us all understand or think in a way that our posture is a result of our choices. It's not something that has to be inflicted on us. It's something we can have control about, and we can decide about. And deciding about our posture also means that we might be putting less load on some joints, perhaps working overloading some muscles when our posture is not good and we exercise. We might be overloading some muscles or some muscle groups, which is not very good. It's not also good for our joints. So we're kind of learning through this posture awareness stretches and exercises. Why is it so important to keep an eye about how we're sitting, how we're standing? Why is it worth to revisit how we're sitting and how we're standing? And for the talks that I am not involved with, my colleagues have other easy stretches exercises or cognitive exercises prepared. So messages to be taken home. As I said, it's use it or lose it. In other words, both cognitive and physical stimulation while aging helps to preserve the functions we do not want to lose. So the sooner we kind of realize that, the sooner we understand and we start looking for the information to understand what we can do on a daily basis, which is relatively easy, for example, in the form and shape of the 5 pillars for aging well, that will help us to preserve the functions for as long as possible. Do it today is another motto, so let's not leave it till tomorrow, but since you're all here today, you're already part of that. And there is something I wanted to mention that you most probably will be aware of already. These are myths about physical exercise and people who exercise. I have been asked all my life, I felt I needed exercise to just go through life. I happen to perhaps have a surplus of energy that just has to be spent meaningfully, and exercise is just the best way I found to go through the day and to kind of lose a little bit of energy, to recharge, to just, exercise is something that helps me cope enormously and with everything. And throughout my life, I've been very often approached by people saying, but how do other people exercise? So not people like you who always go out and have a smile on their face when they come back from a run or an exercise workout in a gym or a swim. But how do other people can actually get there if we're not so energetic or if we just don't feel that way? And to this I usually say it is a myth that people who exercise always do it happily, always have a grin on their face, and that the grin is actually always happy, because sometimes it's just exhaustion. It is not easy for anybody. And I have also worked a lot with elite athletes throughout my studies at Charles University in Prague. And I have seen many times in my life that people who either exercise all their lives or people who don't exercise, everybody, including me, we all feel sometimes that we just don't want to do it. And that instead of going out for half an hour, it might be, we might do better if we just stay for this half an hour on the couch because we haven't slept well, we haven't eaten well yesterday, or there is a bug going round, our children are ill, and it's just life is overwhelming. And it is a myth that everybody wants to exercise at any point in time, or that there are people who are keen and happy to exercise at any point in time happily. It is a huge myth, because in everybody, including me and including all the elite athletes I've seen in my life, and there were many, everybody would like to stay on the couch. But the only difference that perhaps people who exercise regularly have already established is that we all know that when we go out, even if we don't want to, and even if we do half of the workout or a quarter of a workout that we initially wanted to or planned, we will feel better. So everyone feels better after we went out for a little walk. If we can't run, let's go for a walk. If we feel wobbly and dizzy, let's have a glass of water, let's do a few stretches at home where we're safe, and let's still try to go out and breathe the fresh air, because the chances are very strong that the moment we come back, even after we've been out or in the gym just for 10-15 minutes, we will start feeling better. It's the hardest thing is to just get out of our house. So I hope that the talk today will kind of add to all the reasons that you probably might be already aware of. So there are just some epidemiological basic facts. We we know that the populations are rapidly aging, but what we may not always know is the extent of the aging. So for the first time in the human history, actually next 5 years, the number of adults age 65 and over will outnumber children under the age of 5. So this is how sometimes you can see on the graphs that are kind of shaping in different directions. Sometimes these graphs actually being very thick at the top are showing how rapidly the numbers of the aging populations are growing, and that there are not enough children born quickly enough to actually outnumber that. And we already know that aging brings a decline in physical and cognitive domain. The trouble with aging is that this decline happens at variable speed for different organs within one individual. So if we're thinking about ourselves and we're thinking, okay, so what might be aging first? Because one of the organs will probably start aging a bit sooner than other organs. We really don't know. We don't know whether it's going to be the heart, we don't know whether it's going to be the brain, we don't know whether it's going to be the kidneys, we don't know whether it's going to be the pancreas who creates insulin that actually prevents us getting glucose intolerance and then type 2 diabetes. We don't know, and we don't know how fast the other organs will be aging after that. So this aging is a process that's incredibly difficult to predict within one individual. So when we come to whole populations, as researchers, we're not in a very easy place. It's incredibly difficult to predict. There are some covariates or some factors that we might be taking into account. But overall, the aging processes are nearly impossible to predict within one individual. We will talk a little bit about the genetic predispositions that may slightly speed up or slow down the aging processes, or show us what we need to be aware of in terms of age-related conditions in our predecessors. However, the genetic predisposition will not affect 100% of our aging and how it might look like, especially if we decide to help it. So looking into that, the 5 pillars are really kind of an everyday, relatively easy fix when it's compared to the seriousness of aging that actually will happen to all of us. Aging well has also become increasingly important because we live older for longer. So it is not only about how many years we live and how long our life is, but it is increasingly about how well we can spend these longer years of our life. The majority of epidemiologic studies have found slower rates of cognitive and physical decline amongst those who routinely engage in more cognitively and/or physically demanding tasks compared to those with more mentally and physically sedentary lifestyles. So being active is incredibly important. Being active physically every day, being active cognitively every day, being active socially every day, and keeping an eye on hydration and nutrition as well. And it kind of nicely circles all the 5 pillars together. And the way we live and we decide to live our lives, because we live our lives in the way we decide to, we make choices every day about what we eat, what we drink, how much we eat, how much we drink, how much we exercise or not, who do we meet, whether we go out to see people and we speak to people. So the way we live our lives has huge effects on the way we age. So this is also why this talk is titled, Are We Ready to Live Longer? Because it is whether we're ready to make these choices. So these are the 5 pillars of aging well again. And I will talk very briefly about some basic biomedical aspects of aging. So these are linking to epigenetics and genetics. So we know aging processes bring decline, that to which we basically try to adapt. aging influences the decline of individual organs and tissues as well as whole systems, and the way our organs age is different for each and every one of us, and the way the systems age is different for each and every one of us. So as I already said, the individual aging is very different and it's very difficult to predict, and this leaves us with a humongously difficult task when we're trying to predict the aging for the populations. The main influences we usually talk about are genetics and epigenetics. So genetics, sometimes we might feel that we're victims of our genes. So some of the genetic outset that is hereditary, that we inherit from our predecessors at conception, basically, may increase predisposition to certain types of diseases or conditions. We cannot change the genetic set we have, and we still don't know enough about genetics and how it works exactly. So we can get, there is some predisposition to conditions that our parents and grandparents may have had, but we will not know whether this will manifest in our lifespan, and we may only be carrying forward a specific gene that these conditions are linking to. So if we don't know enough about our predecessors, we are sometimes not so troubled because we don't know what they suffered from. Sometimes the problem is that we know what our predecessors have suffered from, and we're trying to kind of establish whether this is going to hit us in our lives or not. Even if we carry over some genes, even if we carry over some of the predispositions to certain types of diseases or conditions, it is not very certain that this will manifest in our lifespan. And whether it will manifest or not is very much also linking to what we do about our lifestyle, what are the decisions we make, how do we live our lives. So it does matter what do we have at the outset, but it doesn't matter so much what we have. Much more what matters is what we actually do with it. So this takes us to the epigenetics, which is the influences of the environment that we're born into. And these influences start incredibly early in our life. When we are conceived and when women are pregnant, already some of the influences of the epigenetics of the environment that the pregnant mother lives in are already starting to shape some of the environments that the baby will then be born into. So this starts even before we're born. This is not always, especially in the early years of our lives, this is not always possible for us to change. Growing up is difficult. And nevertheless, the influence of the environment is huge. The good news is that we have some degree of control over this. So whether we do make decisions, we do go through life by making decisions on a daily basis. If we realize that our decisions might be slightly better in some areas and we start making those better decisions, we will see an impact on our life. Of course, it's easier said than done, and changing our lives, changing our lifestyles and making different decisions is a huge step into an unknown. So it is not an easy step, but it is a possible one, that actually we don't have to be victims of our genes, we don't have to be victims of our nurture, we can be winners by choice. And this choice relates to many choices we make over our lifespan, but also links to what we eat, to nutrition, links to what we drink and how we drink, hydration, links to what we exercise, whether we exercise and how we exercise, physical activity. It links to social stimulation, to who we engage with, whether we talk to people, whether we call people, whether we meet people, whether we like people. and also around cognitive stimulation, about what we do every day to keep our brain working. And sometimes, and there are some examples, for example, in the Aging Brain talk, about types of exercises, cognitive exercises we can do that are just a gentle workout, or that are, as is sometimes called, a mental sweat. Things that are new, that we learn new, that are new to us. Could be a new language, it could be new exercise, it could be going to do aqua aerobic that we have never done before, it could be meeting a new group of people, it could be to do something that we haven't tried before and we're keen to try, because our brain benefits from this immensely through the cognitive stimulation that we get. Now, I've already said that physiological aging equals normal and is expected. Normal in terms of aging is a result of natural maturational processes, an expected part of the aging process, whereas sometimes physiological aging, normal aging, can turn pathological. Pathological aging then includes non-normative factors such as disease, injury, trauma. Could be to the brain, it could be to other tissues, and it could be sometimes triggered also by hospital stay. This is why we, for example, see where people are very quickly being deconditioned after they had a fall, which means that there was a trauma, people were put in a hospital, sometimes, often, they are dehydrated, they are medicated as well, so then the medication further impairs our recovery, because the medication staying for longer times, for longer in our organism, and can create a toxic buildup. This toxic buildup then influences how our brain and other organs work. And if we stay dehydrated, the overall deconditioning, just because of an injury and medication linking to it, is huge. Another deconditioning that happens is when we're immobilized for a few days, where we start to lose quickly our muscle mass, as also known as muscle atrophy. So sometimes injuries or traumas can actually trigger pathological aging, because there is so much suddenly that the organism is not able to cope with and adapt to anymore. So although we discuss every now and then pathological aging and some examples in this series, we really focus mostly on physiological aging, on how to optimize our cognitive and physical aging. I also usually mention the main theories of aging. I will do this very briefly today. We have theories around that's called Hayflick limit or Hayflick phenomenon, which tells us roughly about how many times the cells are able to divide before they die. So cells are dividing through our lifespan, creating new cells, and when the cell is not able to divide, the cell dies. This is, for example, how we lose neurons, and the older we get, and less cognitively, socially and physically stimulated we are, the faster we can be also losing the neurons. There are wear and tear theories, which are kind of telling us that the aging is a result of wear and tear, of natural processes that just make that throughout us using our organs and tissues the whole life, the organs and tissues are getting tired, they're worn and torn, and this kind of then constitutes the main basis for the decline associated with aging. We also have theories around oxidative stress and apoptosis. Apoptosis is programmed cell death. This has to do with some of the self-regulatory mechanisms that our body is usually able to do itself. Sometimes when the self-repair mechanisms in our body and self-regulatory mechanisms are impaired, again, it could be due to injury, due to trauma, due to another factor that might be even genetic. The apoptosis, the programmed cell death, is changed and might happen much sooner. And again, when cells start to die, this is where we usually see a bit more of a decline. But no matter what aging theory we may want to work with, the changing resulting from aging processes are at physical, psychological, cognitive, and systemic levels. When we talk about systemic levels, we talk about systems. So one of the systems that is being affected by aging is our immune system, which is a network of cells and tissues and organs that work together to defend the body against attacks by foreign invaders. These could be primarily microbes, tiny organisms, bacteria, parasites, and or fungi that can cause infections. Infections are problematic when our immune system is not working very well, especially low-grade infections. When we have a high-grade infection, we know the infection is there. When we have a low-grade infection, we don't always see it as an infection that needs to be treated, and this is how we, for example, can go with untreated cough for a long time or other conditions. When there are low-grade infections, they are often chronic, and these are exhausting for our bodies, for our systems. So they exhaust the immune system even more, and the immune system is then not so able to deal with high-grade infections that might be, for example, cold, it might be, for example, COVID, it might be, for example, pneumonia, it might be acute infections that the body needs to drum up all the reserves that it has. And if there are low-grade infections, chronic infections or chronic conditions in the background, the immune system's not always able to do that. And the immune system's functions and efficiency actually goes down with aging. So if we don't keep an eye on the 5 pillars for aging well and exercise regularly, keep an eye on nutrition, make sure we don't stay dehydrated, make sure we hydrate plenty, and stimulate our brain as well. This is a way to actually prevent the immune system of really going down, suffering from steep decline associated with aging. And it is also a way to prevent these low-grade infections and chronic infections. I've already mentioned the self-repair mechanisms that are also impaired, which is one of the reasons why cancers happen in later life. We have also nervous system, which is a complex network of nerves and cells that carry messages to and from the brain to the spinal cord and to various parts of the body. We often do give an example around proprioception that is linking to the central nervous system and peripheral nervous system, which can be, for example, tripping an obstacle over an obstacle as a delayed response from the brain. So as we age, the speed with which the information travels slows down or is slowed down. The speed with which the information gets processed in the brain is slower as well. So if we see an obstacle that we want to lift our foot and walk over, this information is already delayed to come to our brain because of the slow traveling of the information. Then the information is being processed, our brain is processing it, which takes us slightly longer as well as we age. And then the information needs to travel back to our foot to actually lift the foot off the ground. So sometimes what's happening in older age is that people are already falling or tripping at the moment when the signal reaches their foot to actually lift the foot and walk over the obstacle. So some of the decline associated with aging when it has to do with nervous system is inevitable. When the decline associated with aging reaches a certain level, the nervous system will be affected as well. So we will start falling. The question is whether we start falling when we're 70 or when we're 90. Or when we're 100. And this has a lot to do with regular exercise and with the use it or lose it motto. So if we do use our nervous system, because we use our nervous system very well when we exercise, when we keep exercising regularly, this slows massively the decline of the nervous system, and we're able to use our organs and tissues in a much more optimal way. Then we have endocrine system, which is a collection of glands and these glands secrete hormones directly into the circulatory system, and then it's carried towards a distant target organs through our blood system. We do talk about chain of hormones. Our hormonal, the way our organs are secreting hormones into the system changes with aging, and we often talk about example of thyroxine, that our body doesn't produce enough of thyroxine, which slows our thyroid gland. And as you may know, thyroid gland kind of contributes massively to our basic metabolism. So if our thyroid gland is underperforming or is hypoactive, then it slows down our metabolism, and then it slows down the whole processing that comes for food, but it also works much slower for any medication we might be taking. So we need to keep an eye on our hormonal levels. Thyroxine is an easy one to measure. We also talk about diabetes and insulin and pancreas. So as we get older, the capacity of pancreas, which is an organ that creates insulin, decreases slightly with aging as well. So we might be more prone to glucose intolerance, which might be a precursor for type 2 diabetes, but not necessarily, because this also has to do how we have been using the pancreas, how we have been keeping eye on nutrition throughout our lifespan. And we talk much more about this in the talk that is around nutrition while aging. We also talk about musculoskeletal system. We talk about muscle atrophy, bone fragility, tendon and joint stiffness, and cardiovascular systems, veins and arteries, and atherosclerosis that happens with aging, and how important it is to have blood regularly circulating to brain and other organs, supporting also our respiratory system for regular breathing, because our brain, for example, is incredibly glucose and oxygen sensitive. So if brain doesn't have enough of nutrients that are circulated by the circulatory cardiovascular system, and it doesn't have enough oxygen, it starts shutting down. So it doesn't perform optimally. So we talk about these very specific aspects in the very specific talks that actually might be to follow if you decide that this is what you would like to hear more about. I will probably pause the talk here. There is even more that I would like to talk about, and I will probably just whiz through the talk just very quickly. These are a few examples about the aging brain. These are some of the exercises we do. We talk about a raising up principle a lot. We talk about proprioception during these easy, stretchy times. We talk a lot about how we may need to position our feet on the floor and how we need to use the floor to actually push away from it in order to defy gravity. As we all know, gravity is pulling everything down, because it's pulling apples down, because it's pulling trees down, because it's pulling leaves down, it's pulling also us down. So as we age, we might find it easily to just not think. It's not only associated with aging though. We may realize that when we're feeling low, we are just under the weather, and we just let the gravity take the best of us instead of standing up, pushing against the gravity wherever and whenever we have the chance. So realizing that if we want to keep our posture straight, we need to start pushing against the floor that we're standing on, that we have our feet on, and if we're sitting like I am right now, I would be pushing against the floor, and I would be pushing against the chair as well, because this is where my bottom is currently sitting on. So we don't need to see exercise as running only, or swimming, or workout in the gym, or other types of exercise. Exercising can be also involving these easy postural stretches where we push against the floor. I invite you to try this with me, to push against the floor, to position your whole foot on the floor and to actually try to push with your toes only, and you will see that some muscles of your calves are taking part in that. If you put your heels down and you push only with your heels, you will see that the muscles are slightly different that are taking part in that. If you put your whole foot on the floor and push with the whole foot, you will realize how many muscles you can involve and exercise at the same time, and that ideally would be involved in maintaining postural alignment. That then improves our postural stability. So if you push against the floor, if you're standing, if you push against the floor and the chair, if you're sitting, and if you push your shoulders a little bit back, it doesn't have to be much, but just a little, to the point where you realize that your abdominal muscles are starting to take part in maintaining this posture. This is a very active posture. This is a posture where gravity doesn't get the best of us, and it is incredibly energetically demanding because it involves many muscles, including our thigh muscles, calf muscles, our back muscles, as well as our abdominal muscles and core muscles. So finding our posture is an exercise that we ideally would be doing several times a day, because we start doing something, and as soon as I will start talking about some aspects, or I'll be taking your questions, the gravity will get the best of me again. So I just need to remind myself to keep the posture I would like to keep. I will probably stop here, and I'm very happy to take any questions. I will take you to the resources page that I have kind of prepared for you, and that I have signposted earlier on in these talks. So there are some interesting podcasts we have been working on with colleagues. They are all public facing, and they are all looking at mindfulness, mindful walking, preventing brain decline while aging, understanding our memory. This is the newest one. And there are some articles, open learn resources. Some of these have embedded videos, some of these don't. The 5 pillars for aging well have embedded videos in them. Then we have another article could be quite interesting around what happens as we age in our brain and how we can stop the fast decline. There are articles around green, blue and outdoor spaces and why is it so important to get out. There is an article we have written with a volunteer that helped set up a program in Milton Keynes with the Parks Trust, 5 Ways Cafe, which is a program that brings social event together with walks for people living with dementia and their carers. There are some COVID-related resources, there are some care and caring related resources, and this is the link to this year's Aging Well Public Talk series that I have presented at the beginning, and I'm very happy to take any questions.
Hi Jitka, it's Jackie Brown here. I don't think we've got many questions except me and Joe been chatting in the box here. I've got one question though. How much does stress impact on the aging process? Because you've mentioned about, you know, we need to push ourselves outside the comfort zone, you know, to get that kind of stimulation. But I know when we do that, that causes a certain level of stress, doesn't it? Can be good and bad stress. So yeah, that's my question.
Jackie, thank you. This is an excellent question. The stress really imposes hugely on the way we age, and the older we get, the more we feel kind of the bodily response to stress as well. When we are younger, this may not be felt immediately, so we may not feel immediately that we're under stress, but it does accumulate no matter how old we are, and it does affect the way our body works, the way our brain works, the way we focus, the way we deal with things, the way we make our decisions. Stress in some ways is a huge neuron killer. So our brain, especially if we are older, is at kind of a risk that when we get very stressed, when we get very angry, or when we get very anxious, it just might have the propensity we might be at the propensity of losing our neurons a bit faster. So if we're losing our neurons, it's not a very good thing, because it means that our brain has fewer neurons to work with and to make all the connections with. So what we want to do is to prevent brain decline through neurons dying quickly. And we want to prevent the brain decline through stimulating the neurons we have, so that they create as dense networks as possible, which then keeps the brain well stimulated overall. So that's one aspect that comes to the biomedical aspect of stress and how our brain might deal with it. Our brain also has a problem sometimes dealing with stress or anxiety. We might feel that our brain goes blank, that we don't understand what people are talking about when we're stressed. This is a completely natural and normal response, and we often see it in small children. We don't realize that we still have the same response sometimes when we're adult, but sometimes I have learned this now. My son is 5, turning 6 pretty soon. When he's under stress or anxious, he would not understand what I'm trying to tell him. So any reasoning, anything saying like, you don't have to be worried about that because this is all fine and you have done this and you know your stuff. None of this actually goes to his brain, because his brain is in a panic mode, and this is what can happen when we're stressed. Now, if we have to make decisions and we're stressed or anxious and our brain goes kind of blank, we may not be making the best decisions we could be making if our brain was functioning optimally. So this is kind of a biomedical aspect of the stress on the brain. What often helps is what I've seen with my son, and I'm now practicing myself as well, is to actually start breathing regularly, because if we breathe in, breathe out, it's our only way in that we can control the heart rate a little bit, we can control how we feel, and the anxiety kind of eases as our breathing regularizes. And this is why also sport is so good as a coping mechanism, because once we start moving, we start focusing on the brain, because it is the living function. If we don't breathe, we can't live. So if we focus on the brain, our brain defocuses on the anxiety and on the fact that the function of the brain froze for a bit. And through the breathing, the normal functions of the brain can retake again. So this is how it kind of works for the brain. Stress also has a huge impact on our body. We, especially sometimes when we are anxious, we can feel that there is a flutter in the stomach. We are not breathing easily. We are holding our breath, which is not a very good thing, because if we hold our breath, then the regular blood circulation bringing oxygen in regular intervals to all our organs, including the brain, is kind of not so regular, and the amount of oxygen that goes to the brain might be slightly different as well. So this is what stress can cause, and the impact can be huge. So dealing with stress, we can think about gentle exercise, we can think about stretching, we can think about going out for a walk, to just start breathing regularly, to refocus the brain on something else, on some of the vital functions, and then the brain kind of gets off the fight or flight response that is often there with huge amount of stress or anxiety.
Gosh, we want to avoid stress then, don't we?
But the thing is that we can't really, because the moment you tell someone don't be so stressed or calm down, nobody has ever calmed down in the history of humanity just because somebody else said so.
Oh, dear.
It is a regulatory mechanism, and stress has a hugely important function for our lives, for our survival. So this is why it's there. It's hugely important. It's telling us something. But sometimes we impose stress on ourselves through stressful working. Relationships can be sometimes stressful, and when we are in the middle of it, we don't always kind of understand that, okay, let's start breathing regularly, let's do a short mindfulness exercise, let's go outdoors, even if it's for 5 minutes, to breathe fresh air, to refocus. The moment we come back, we feel better. We feel better because the brain refocuses on more vital functions and lets go of the huge thing that we just sometimes don't know how to deal with immediately.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Totally agree with that. Another question that's sprung up here is about hydration. And yes, I've just had my glass of water, but we are conscious that, you know, as you get older, you tend not to drink the water so much. It's more hot drinks, isn't it? So, you know, what impact does hydration have on the aging process?
Thank you. Huge impact is by hydration, which is why it's actually a standalone pillar. We need to drink regularly. We would ideally need to drink around 2 liters every day, which is 6 to 8 cups. We can drink a little bit more than that, but when being around the 2.5 liters is usually fine. If we drink more, if we drink 3.5 liters, 4 liters, then we're overly hydrating, and our kidneys are getting incredibly busy in cleaning all this into changing it all this into urine, and we'll be incredibly busy going to the toilet all day, and it will kind of deplete us in terms of minerals. So we need to really think not about overhydrating, but not about dehydrating either. What we need to realize when it comes to hydration is that we need the basic minimum for the basic metabolic processes, breaking down food, thermoregulation, all the basic processes that happen, that are chemical, hormonal, that we can't see, that we can't feel, that happen at cellular level. All these need at least 1.5 liters a day. So what we should be thinking is what do I get on top of that? So that's why 2 liters overall are considered as okay hydration. When we are hydrated enough, our metabolism works well. If we are dehydrated, it slows our basic metabolism down. What we know is that aging also slows metabolism down. So if the aging hits dehydration, it's doubling the slowdown of the metabolic processes, which means that we have more problems, or it costs us more energy to process food. It costs us much more to process medication, any medication, even if we're not taking medication daily and we take medication spuriously, even that will be slowed down, and the medication will be staying much longer in our body, which is tricky because if in any case we need to take another medication, the new medication coming in might hit the medication still lingering around because we're dehydrated and hasn't been cleared out fast enough through our kidneys out of our bodies. And when the two medications meet, there is a huge chances that we might be suffering side effects of the medication. Not leaving aside the fact that the medication build up in our body can have a very toxic impact on our organs and also our brain. So our brain might be, when we, for example, are taking medications regularly and we're dehydrated, taking the medication, no matter how helpful it can be, it may make us feel incredibly dizzy, wobbly, we may feel confused, we may feel nauseous, we're not focusing well, which means we're not likely to remember well, so it impacts our memory, it impacts our attention span, we might be prone to make mistakes, we're more prone to falls as well. So it becomes a humongous, vicious cycle that it's really difficult to break, and it may start just with dehydration. So here is to healthy 6 to 8 cups of water. Of course, water is ideal. If we have a cup of coffee and a cup of tea in a day and we still have 6 to 8 cups of water, we should be doing fine. The coffee and tea might be, if we drink a lot of it, they might actually prove to be more dehydrating than hydrating beverages. So what we need to be mindful of is not to lose more water than we put in. And yeah.
Right, now I need to stop drinking as much coffee as I do and up my water intake. That's really helpful.
We all do, but it's not easy to change these habits. But this is how slowly this kind of starts. So it's not just when we have people telling us, or our GPs and consultants and pharmacists telling us, make sure you drink plenty. It doesn't mean much when somebody tells you, make sure you drink plenty. The fact is, when we understand what the dehydration does in our bodies, how horrible consequences it can have. Severe dehydration can also mimic depression symptoms and early onset dementia symptoms. So this is something we need to be mindful, because when we're dehydrated, our brain will not be performing optimally. If our brain's not performing optimally, we might feel sluggish, we might feel depressed, we might feel that we don't remember, we're confused, we don't focus, our thermoregulation is all over the place, we might feel that we're ill, and all this just can be because of the dehydration. So immensely important.
Yes, I'll raise a glass to that and better up my water intake. I think that's about it in terms of questions. All I would say that I was really interesting, and I'm sure everybody online at the minute also found that really interesting. And both myself and Joe and the rest online would like to thank you, Jitka, for that really informative webinar. Some notes to take away. We have recorded this webinar, so we will be distributing that the recording out, and also the slides as well. So please do circulate it. And obviously, you know, there are some other sessions there that Jitka went through at the very beginning. If any of you would like to hear any of those topics, then there is a link on that presentation, isn't there, Jitka? So brilliant. Yeah, thank you.
Yes,
thank you very much for that.
Yes,
that was really informative.
And if you would be keen to kind of talk more in depth about a topic that might have been mentioned but may not be so developed in terms of a presentation, I'm very happy to work with you guys to kind of develop this so that you get the resource that you need. So just let me know. It's been great to be here, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Joe, did you want to say anything?
Just to resonate what you've said, Jackie, and thank you very much, Jitka. Really informative session there. Many of the information certainly resonates, and I think we were all adjusting our posture throughout and picking up a glass and having a few more sips of water.
Yeah, we'll go for a run now.
That's right. So yeah, really thought-provoking subject matter there, and I think we've all benefited from listening to that, and now it's a case of sort of reviewing how we can help spread the word amongst our own support networks, really. So yeah, just a big thank you from me, and we'll certainly be in touch. Hope everyone enjoyed that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.